Before ancient religious texts issue laws or commandments, they often architect a psychological framework. They build a structural lens through which the reader is forced to view the rest of the manuscript. We are looking at a specific English-Arabic translation of the Quran. This particular edition was published under the academic and governmental authority of the Ministry of Religious Affairs for the People's Republic of Bangladesh. Our focus is the text's second and longest chapter, Sura Al-Baqarah, or the Heifer. In Islamic scholarship, this specific chapter is widely considered a structural microcosm of the entire book. Studying the exact sequence of this chapter exposes a deliberate pedagogical and literary architecture. The first 74 verses of Al-Baqarah do not present a random collection of moral parables. Instead, they form a rigorous three-stage logical progression. This progression moves the reader through three distinct conceptual zones. The text begins by a strict, abstract taxonomy of human belief. It defines the underlying parameters. From there, it takes those parameters and stress tests them, first against cosmic entities and then against historical actors. This architecture forces an engagement with the psychological mechanics of belief before the text introduces any historical event. In the first 20 verses, the text immediately divides human epistemology into three rigid categories. The first category, spanning verses 2 through 5, defines the believers. Their primary characteristic is an active trust in what the text calls the unseen. The text specifies that this group successfully translates their abstract belief into tangible action, like maintaining prayer and practicing regular charity. The second category, contained tightly in verses 6 and 7, is characterized by absolute, unyielding rejection. To describe this group, the text uses a specific sensory metaphor, a permanent veil drawn over their eyes, ears, and hearts, blocking external guidance completely. The third category receives the highest verse count by far, spanning verses 8 through 20. These are the hypocrites, and they represent a much more complex archetype. Verse 11 isolates their core trait. When told to make not mischief on the earth, they say, "We only want to make peace." This category operates on profound self-deception. They suffer from an internal cognitive dissonance, insisting they are righteous while actively destabilizing their environment. This three-part matrix acts as the master diagnostic tool required to understand the rest of the chapter. By defining these three archetypes up front, the text equips the reader with a psychological framework to evaluate the underlying motives of all subsequent characters. With the rules established, the text shifts down the timeline into its first narrative test, the creation of a vicegerent on Earth. Verses 30 through 34 map out a clear chain of command between the Creator, angels, Adam, and Iblis. But the system breaks at verse 34. When commanded to bow, the angels comply, but Iblis presents an anomalous reaction. He refuses. The text frames this refusal carefully. It is not an accidental mistake or a simple misunderstanding. It is described as haughtiness, a foundational arrogance. This arrogance maps Iblis directly onto the second column of our opening taxonomy, the absolute rejectors. This cosmic event operates as a narrative proof of concept for the abstract rules laid out in the first 20 verses. The creation myth here is not deployed for world building. It is utilized to demonstrate exactly how internal epistemological rejection manifests as active external rebellion. Moving further down the sequence, the chapter presents its central historical case study, the Israelites and the parable of the heifer. In verse 67, Moses issues a highly simplified command. The group is instructed merely to sacrifice a heifer. Instead of executing this straightforward task, the audience immediately demands iterative, hyper-specific parameters. Verse 68 filters for an animal of middling age. Verse 69 demands a fawn-colored heifer. Finally, verse 71 requests one not trained to till the soil, perfectly sound and without blemish. Notice the linguistic pattern they use at every step. They repeatedly tell Moses, "Beseech on our behalf your Lord." This continuous questioning operates as a specialized form of narrative resistance. By demanding extreme specificity, the group creates a tactical method for evading the original simple command, all while appearing to seek clarity. This specific behavioral pattern links cleanly to the third category of our opening taxonomy, the hypocrites. They are masking their deep-seated rebellion in the bureaucratic language of religious compliance. The parable of the heifer acts as a historical stress test. It illustrates how the cognitive dissonance from the opening verses plays out in real-world dialogue. We arrive at the culmination of this analysis in verse 74, where the text steps back to issue a definitive psychological diagnosis of the actors. The verse states that following these events, their hearts became like rocks and even worse in hardness. This terminal hardness of heart connects directly back to the initial psychological disease mentioned 50 verses prior in verse 10's definition of the hypocrites. The geological metaphor of the rock serves as the logical culmination of the preceding 73 verses. The text maps theological rebellion as a compounding psychological rigidity. As the commands are evaded, the underlying worldview hardens. Sura Al-Baqarah functions as a deliberate pedagogical framework. It builds an abstract taxonomy of human belief, tests it across time and space, and transforms that epistemology into a devastating historical diagnosis.